Hey, everybody, it's Dave Neal, host of the Rush Hour podcast, here to discuss the Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, Justin Baldoni lawsuits. And we have star of the Emmy nominated Hot Bench on CBS. She's a graduate of Yale University and Stanford Law School. It's Rachel Juarez. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
I'm doing great. We met through our pal Reality Steve
We did.
covering the Clayton Echard suit, which we're still kind of discussing. But how about this Blake Lively story? Where did this find you? Have you been caught up on all the news? Like, tell me about the fan of law and how you sort of digest stories like this.
I mean, this one is the biggest, most fascinating, I think, case out there, not true crime, but legal case in a long time. So I do a lot of, talking about true crime mostly. But when this one popped up, it seemed like all anybody wanted to talk about. So as we went for like hot bench interviews with like Us Weekly, they said, "Oh, hey, tell me about hot bench. Actually, just tell me about Blake Lively."
Yeah,
So,
no, I mean, it's
you know,
fascinating, right? Because you have a lot of money on both sides. And, in generally, I mean, a lot of times people settle cases because they just don't want to deal with them, right?
right.
But in this case, a settlement kind of feels like you're admitting you don't have a case, right?
In a way, I think I've heard a lot of people say, and I don't think it's wrong, that Justin Baldoni would want an apology in order to settle. He would want some admission that these allegations are false, that Blake Lively was wrong. I actually don't, I actually think he would settle without an apology because I think that getting rid of this case when Blake Lively initiated it and kind of everybody having a walk away when he's winning the press battle would be enough for him to continue to win the press battle
To not have to get deposed and all of the other things that would come out.
and spend tens of millions of dollars, which is probably what this will cost. Yeah, and I think it's probably not going to get any better for him because I think he's killing the media war. And so I could see him walking away. I don't know how she does.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's interesting, right? Is this media war, she kind of was the first strike with the New York Times, and in his response, it's like clearly he's going to want to defend himself. Blake Lively's camp calls their lawsuit retaliatory. What are your thoughts on his lawsuit towards her? Is it retaliatory or is it just like, hey, this is fair if he's got the evidence?
I think it's retaliatory in a non-negative way, right? It is clearly in retaliation, but not the way that maybe in response would be the better word. I think what I think is so offensive really is that they're leaning into this abuser kind of mentality and saying that this his response lawsuit is another form of abuse because I think that really starts to undermine real domestic violence and real abuse.
Yeah, and it does. I mean, if this thing does go to trial, they're going to have they've showed just a snippet of the video that they're going to have that might prove their case. And if it really becomes like an ink blot test where we're supposed to sort of give our own thoughts on like the context, it's so blurred. Are they acting? Are they not? It seems to be like a very unique case in that they are playing characters. So you don't just get to watch security footage to see if someone did something. It's, well, do they agree that this is the kiss they would do in the scene? And then how far, like, how do those boundaries get set? I mean, like, this could change the way they discuss any romantic movie moving forward.
Yeah. I think if this case goes to trial or if it goes further than this, the most interesting thing to me is going to be hearing what is customary on set when you do a romantic scene like this. Like what is appropriate and what's not. Because I think most of us are just speculating and but I think your point about, it kind of it's not objective when you look at it is part of the important legal point here. That if it is so open to interpretation, whether this is appropriate or not, and it's so fuzzy, it's kind of hard to say that it's sexual harassment, right?
Yeah.
And I don't say that because I think a lot of people would say, oh, but in the past, and it's true, there's been so many things that people would think are fuzzy that are actually just blatant sexual harassment, right? So it may be the case that these things are just blatant sexual harassment. But if it really is that they're that fuzzy, it's kind of hard to call it, you know, abuse or sexual harassment.
And that's why it was so hard when, Blake's side wanted to make this look like, oh, it's like when like your boss, it's so inappropriate for your boss to share porn with you. And it's like, well, when you say it like that, it is. But then when you get into any of the context whatsoever, you go, well, I mean, this is a lot more to the story. So you talked about Justin Baldoni winning the PR game. He's represented by Brian Friedman. Can you speak at all towards why it takes such a high-powered attorney to come after someone like WME, which is obviously a high-powered group of attorneys being in a large agency? What's that power dynamic like?
So there's a couple of things. The most significant one is it's hard to find lawyers who is willing to make an enemy out of Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, WME, right? You have to find somebody who has enough of a career and who has enough of a reputation that he can make enemies of them and he'll still be just fine, right? There aren't a lot of attorneys out there like that. You also have to find one who's comfortable with the media and somewhat media savvy. I would, Brian Friedman has experience in this area. He's not navigating the press for the first time. But I think you also have to have a lawyer who's willing to be aggressive and to kind of walk on a fine line, right? Because it's very clear that all the stuff they've been putting online is walking a fine line between improperly kind of putting information out to a potential jury pool and fairly defending oneself in the media. And I think a lot of lawyers would say, I'm not going to put up a website with all of your good evidence on it, sir. I'm sorry, right? But you have to find someone who's confident enough in their career and their reputation to say, I will walk that line as long as I don't feel like I'm crossing it.
You know what's so funny? You're so right, and I've covered Brian Friedman for a long time. He's covered. I mean, he's fought America's Got Talent. He like labor union issues, workers' rights. Cassie Randolph against a Bachelor contestant. Like this guy's like no joke. When was so interesting to see Harvey Levin of TMZ interview him.
Right.
He had this like shit-eating grin on his face. Like you could just tell, like it looked like two buddies just having a conversation about what's for lunch. And he is in the center as a lawyer of hundreds of millions of dollar lawsuits. And it's like, boy, I just couldn't imagine wanting anyone else on your side. Like you said, he just seems, and again, not to be pimping for Brian Friedman here, but he just seems like you said, lawyers wouldn't even want to touch WME. I mean, if you were a lesser known lawyer and you go up against WME, they could kind of box you out of the industry, right?
Of course. So I think the two kinds of lawyers you can get to sort of not be blacklisted are someone who is so bad and unknown that it doesn't matter if WME boxes them out, they're boxed out anyway, or somebody who has such a storied career and who has such a potential source of clientele. It doesn't matter if WME blacklists him because the next person who wants to sue a studio will come to him anyway.
So
So
yeah, I mean, and then the problem I have is if Justin settles here, is you said he might settle without an apology, but what's stopping Blake from sharing her story in the future? Like, would there be any sort of like a settlement that would involve no talking about this? Like, how do you move forward?
I think it is highly likely that if they settled, there would be a non-disparagement agreement. They would probably work very closely together on releasing a statement and crafting what can be said about it in the future. In fact, I would expect in a case like this, they would actually script out for people like Justin and Blake. If you're asked about this by a reporter, you must say this exact sentence. You can't even add a very in there. It has to be exactly what we say. And I would expect that as part of settlement, they'd have to stop disparaging each other in the press. So not like a non-disclosure agreement, but a non-disparagement agreement so that they can't go out and then just trash each other and have more defamation lawsuits.
So what do you think Brian Friedman, now obviously like they're playing chicken, right? He's saying, I want to depose her tomorrow. They're just going, full steam ahead, like a good negotiation. What odds do you place at a settlement happening versus this going to trial?
I think the odds are hugely in favor of a settlement, mostly because 90% of cases settle. But also, Blake's team really tipped her hand when they asked and they filed a letter with the court saying Brian shouldn't be allowed to depose her. Because there is no chance that that was her lawyer's idea, right? Anybody who's been litigating for a year or 6 months knows that you don't get to pick who deposes your client, right? They pick the meanest, most aggressive person, right? That's part of the game. The only reason that that letter gets written is because Blake Lively demanded that it be written and said to her lawyers, he's not deposing me. I don't care what you say. I'm the client. I'm not sitting for deposition with him. And they were like, oh God, what do we do? I guess maybe we ask that he not depose her. And that tells me she's terrified of the
Yeah,
next.
and you can tell just from the court on Monday, Brian Friedman speaks to the press right after, and her attorneys kind of all huddle together and then like nervously walk away. Now, obviously, like these lawyers, they would have to have Blake's permission. Would they have to have Blake's permission before speaking to the press? And does that tell us anything about sort of the working conditions and the communication between them and Blake?
So they don't strictly need her permission, but in reality, they need her permission. Because if your lawyers go and speak to the press and you don't want them to, you fire them the next day. So, as a practical matter, yeah, they would need her permission. Keep in mind the type of lawyer that Brian Friedman is, very few like him, right? Blake is represented by a very good law firm, but a traditional big law firm who's been trained to say no comment, right? Most huge law firms do not have lawyers that are comfortable just walking right up after they've done a trial and knowing what they should and shouldn't say to the press. It's an uncommon feature of very big lawyers.
Yeah, and so the question that I have is this, this new we kind of live in this new world where it's not necessarily that it's innocent, that it's guilty till proven innocent, but so much of their brands, almost all of it is really about, do fans like them? If people like them, that they will continue to work in this industry, even if you're a bad actor. You got The Rock is beloved, right? He can work in anything. He's a terrible actor.
Even
So
Hasselhoff, right? Everyone loves him, you
you
know?
love it, right? And that's just the world we live in. So it used to be like you would stay quiet, you would let the facts speak for themselves in the courtroom. But what have you noticed a shift just the way we interact parasocially on social media with arguing and litigating this case outside the courtroom versus inside?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the internet and social media have been a huge shift. But I also think in a case like this, where you're dealing with two people whose celebrity is their brand, what happens in the media is so much more important than what happens in the courtroom to me, right? It's much more important for the trajectory of their career, whether they win the PR battle, than whether they win the defamation trial or not. Now, obviously, winning the defamation trial will help the PR battle. But I think when you have a case like this, it's the right way to look at it for your client, right? More holistically. Like Justin Baldoni cares a lot more and even more for Blake that they do well in this PR war for the next 3 years, more than that they perfectly set themselves up to win at trial. And I think that's one of the reasons why why Brian Friedman, who does this a lot, has been willing to toe the line, because even if he gets in a little trouble at trial, he's winning the PR war for his client. And globally, that is more important.
Yeah, like this idea, when we talk about Blake Lively, we talk about Ryan Reynolds, and who knows who's really pulling the strings. But this sort of this, if when this came out, the New York Times, it's do or die for Justin Baldoni and his family. And I've noticed this, as I was threatened with that $100 million lawsuit by Laura Owens. You learn, like, all right, now it's about me being able to provide for my family. So for Justin Baldoni, and again, I've used this like analogy, but he's the guy who's had his territory invaded. He's going to fight to the metaphorical death to make sure that his image and his family's livelihood comes out on top with all of this. So if there was some sort of settlement, do you think, like, if you were Justin Baldoni's attorney, would you be looking for a $10+ million settlement? And do you think Blake would ever give him any money?
I can't imagine the optics of her giving money. So if she does, I don't think we'll ever know about it. I think if she ever does give him money, there will be a non-disclosure agreement about that we'll never know about. But I think he would walk away at a point like this without money. I think where he is at, I didn't know the guy's name before all of this happened. And here I am. I mean, I've followed it a lot, but I have a better impression of him now than my nothing impression of him before. He's better than nothing, right? And I feel like the general consensus is that he's winning the PR war. So if he can walk away with the fees that he's spent to date, which are probably hundreds of thousands of dollars, because he's got a whole team of lawyers over there working around the clock. I think he probably does that without requiring her to pay him. It may be a different story depending on what his financial situation is in a year and a half when the legal fees are $10 million. That if he doesn't have a backer, if Wayfarer doesn't have people that are paying the legal fees, if they don't have insurance, things like that, then he might have to say, this has, driven me broke. I have to get money to settle, or I have to go to trial and hope to win.
Yeah, so if you're Justin Baldoni and he's got, and I agree with all of that, that it would make sense to just want to walk away from this. You won the public opinion and all of that, but he's also claims he's got, his financier who's a billionaire who says, hey, I spent $100 million. So if you were Justin and had that money that's just available now, obviously you don't want to just light money on fire, but his financier who's got this $1 billion is also his backer for these movies. So like, do you think that could be like one of the main motivations to not settle and just go, you know what, we're going to ride this thing as far as we can because we know like deep down we've got all of the evidence?
Yes, absolutely. And it could, and more so, it puts him in a position to not have to settle, right? Because if this guy was worth $3 million and that was the money he had, he's going to have to settle at some point, or get rid of Brian Freeman and hire a lawyer that's not going to win the case for him, right? So yeah, I mean, if that money would be a huge reason not to settle, and it would be a huge reason if he wanted to settle to insist on an apology or a statement that makes clear that Blake's allegations have all been determined to be false or something like that, because he has the money to go to trial.
Yeah, because you hear these these lawsuits that have happened recently with Trump suing different media companies. I believe it was ABC and there was a few others, and they just paid him a couple $1 million to say we don't want to deal with this. Which by the way, I think is a terrible move because that throws under the bus all the other media companies, but they just didn't want to deal with the depositions and all the ugliness. So on a corporate level, you see that happen a lot where people just pay money to have it go away. But like we've been talking about on Justin's level, it's like this is his family, and if you can't prove, but like you said, if he's already got the public opinion, is that enough? Now my question is, we've seen so much evidence come out, as it's played out in the media, but is there something Blake might have that wouldn't be shown yet? Because like, we're not privy to all of this discovery, right? Like, is there anything out there she might have some ring camera footage we don't know about?
So right now, I have a hard time imagining that she's got some evidence, some really good evidence that we don't know about, because it was very clear, she did it first in her complaint. She put all her best evidence, all the best text messages right there in the complaint to create a document that was ready for media consumption. So I think if she already had other really good stuff and now she's totally losing the PR battle, I don't see any planet on which she doesn't release it. But she could get other stuff, right? Discovery hasn't happened yet. And it's certainly possible there could be documents out there that support her. And it's also possible, if what she says about him acting this way towards other people on set is true, it's possible they have proof that they haven't given to her yet and that she will get one way or another in the course of the lawsuit.
Yeah, like when you talk about Discovery, I mean, she could literally get all of the film footage,
Yeah,
right? And just see if,
absolutely.
because obviously he shared what he wanted to share, but that's not everything. I can't imagine if there was some of that. I just can't imagine a world in which Justin Baldoni knew there was footage of him and he still was coming after her the way he is.
I really think that's right. But but the problem is you look at Blake's side, and that's exactly what they did. They put three text messages out of context in there and said, look at what they did, knowing full well that the fourth one completely changed the whole conversation. So it's kind of hard to know, right? But I agree with you. I don't think that it's very likely that there's going to be on-camera footage of him like sexually harassing her. I
Yeah,
don't think that's going to be there because he wouldn't have put it out if he knew that was coming.
The final thing that I look for as just a random nobody who knows nothing about this is now if my wife is at work and the thermostat is set to the wrong temperature, she's going to let me know. It's fucking cold in here. It's 68 degrees. The bitch doesn't turn it up to the right level.
Right.
I know what somebody ate for lunch based on my wife's text messages.
Yeah.
So Blake Lively brags to Justin Baldoni early on. Me and my husband talk 24/7 about everything. So all I need, whether it holds up in court or not, but my public opinion is if she claims he crossed the line and has the timestamps of those text messages, that would mean a lot to me. But that's again something that would be so easy for her to provide if she had it.
Yeah, and so this raises a much bigger issue. I think a lot of people share your opinion, and I do too, as a human, right? Somebody would know. Taylor would know, right? Somebody's going to know if you're going to work and being harassed every day. So you're going to be telling someone about it, or someone's going to be checking in on you, like how was it today on set? Do you feel okay? The problem with Ryan is that right now her communications with him are protected from discovery because they're married. And not only are they protected from discovery, but the spouses cannot be called to testify against one another. So they can't call Ryan without her permission and force him to testify about Blake. If she comes forward and puts 6 text messages out, she waives her privilege. So
so if she has text messages that are there that she wants to use for her evidence, that opens Ryan up to complete discovery?
not complete discovery because there's partial waivers, right? But what you can't do is say, well, here are the text messages I like. Oh, but you can't have any others because they're marital privilege, right? It would open it up a lot, right? You can't use it. They say you can't use the privilege as a sword and a shield. You can't say, haha, here are my text messages with Ryan that helped me, but oh no, the privilege, you can't use them. So now if all that was in the text messages was really good evidence she was harassed and no evidence that she was doing anything wrong, that'd be a really good reason to say I'm happy to waive my privilege. But that's a huge decision. And my guess is, that's not going to happen.
All right, so give me this crystal ball. What do you think actually happened between her and Ryan? Do you think they actually plotted a takeover, or do you think they actually believed that they were wronged and then felt entitled to a takeover?
That's such a good question. My total speculation at this point is that Blake wants to be more than just a hot blonde actress. She wants to be a director. She wants to be a producer. And she has Taylor and Ryan, right? Her best friend and her husband, who are more moguls than she is, right? Taylor, is doing all of these things. She's producing the biggest tour in the history of time. She's directing her own videos. And Ryan does a lot of the same stuff. I think she wanted to be like them. And I think she has them saying, like, stand up for yourself, Blake. If he doesn't want to give you the dailies, insist on it. Like, take control. That would be my totally uneducated speculation on what happened. I do not think that she was sexually harassed and therefore felt the right to take over the movie.
I agree with you on the fact that they probably hyped her up. And when we watched that one clip of her trying to sort of direct him into the right lighting, I think some people, when they're told no, they turn into a different version of themselves. Like I could see a scenario, and I'm not a psychologist, where there is just like the inner child emerging, the rejected child, and it's like, and then it's just like warfare can break out. Something so simple as being told no can really spark like, because the industry is so toxic. You're told no all the time, and then you build up this thing. She's the most paid person on set, and we got this twip from some stupid CW show trying to direct me, the lead actor. So I can see the ego being in control there.
Yeah, and your best friend is Taylor Swift, who people probably just don't say no to, who's the most successful, one of the most beloved celebrities, in the world right now. And the other thing is, again, we have that evidence that she may not be able to hear no, because I am sure that when she said to her lawyers, I don't want Brian Friedman deposing me, they said, I'm sorry, too bad, there's nothing you can do. And I'm very confident she said, oh no, it's not happening. Like, I'm not going to hear no from my lawyers, right? She told them she knows better. So that is a kind of sign to me about who's controlling that relationship. And if you're someone who can't listen to your lawyers, you know, you're probably not listening to your director on set either.
And it's the same type of person, right? There's so little control we have in life that you want to control. Like she wants to control her wardrobe. I mean, you saw Ryan Reynolds try to control the shoot schedule, saying, I'd get your line producer tattooed on my asshole if you could just make this happen for me. And
Uh-huh.
then, so you see these moments where they're trying to exert dominance, and boy, I mean, what an ugly scenario. And all we can do is speculate, but I really appreciate your opinions. And please, like, come back anytime to share your thoughts on this matter.
You tell me. I told you this, offline. I'm following you to find out everything that's happening in the case. So you tell me when something exciting has happened.
Are we going to see you? Are we going to see you at Reality Steve's Vegas party? Are you going to do that?
I will
Oh,
be there. I'm a big
nice.
Vegas person. So
Good.
I go to Vegas a lot. I played poker for a long time. I'm a big gambler. So that was an easy, like, of course I'll come.
Oh, can't wait. So we'll have to meet you live in the flesh then. And anything you want to promote while we got you here?
Hot Bench, right? Go to hotbench.com or .tv, find your, local listings.
How does that, by the way, before we go, how does that work? Do you film just a bunch of episodes at once? Like what's the schedule like for that?
Yeah, so we film, so it's actually changing because we're moving production to Connecticut, right?
Oh,
Along
wow.
with the Los Angeles exodus. We are moving after 11 years in LA to Connecticut for season 12. So they're slightly revising the schedule. We're going to be filming for 5 months of the year, basically every other week for 2 or 3 days at a time. And we film usually about 7 or 8 cases a day. So
are you going to be flying into Connecticut and flying out?
Yeah.
Oh, look at you. Hopefully they give you a Delta Comfort for that. That sounds
I'm looking for Delta One. We'll see. I tried JetBlue Mint. We can plug that. It's fabulous the other day.
Well, maybe we'll get you in Taylor Swift's private jet. We'll see if we can link you guys up together.
I don't know, but if my daughter ever flew in Taylor Swift's private jet, her life, she would just end it right there. That'd be the best day of her life. Could never go up from there,
Oh, how funny. Well, yeah, so everyone can go check out Hot Bench. And thanks again for joining me today. I appreciate your input here.
Anytime.